Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you and members of the committee for this opportunity to speak with you. My name is Nick Germana. I'm a representative from Keene, Cheshire 1. I have passed around on one side a written copy of my testimony, and on the other side a letter to the committee that was written by a child care provider in my district who was not able to be here today. I'm here to speak in favor of HB 566 FNA. And again, I thank you for hearing my testimony. The purpose of the bill, as you can see, is to create a child care workforce development fund to administer signing and retention bonuses to child care workers in New Hampshire. We are all well aware of the dramatic shortage of child care workers in the state, with well-documented consequences for the economic well-being of Granite State families and communities. Governor Sununu has listed addressing this shortage as one of his top priorities for this biennium, and Speaker Packard, as we know, has created the Special House Committee to explore productive bipartisan solutions. When we talk about the issues facing our state around child care, we talk about affordability and accessibility. All too often, however, these two desirables are at odds with each other. Achieving the goal of affordability requires that we keep the cost of child care down, ideally at 7% of a family's income or less. The way this is usually achieved is by paying low wages to the women and men who deliver this vital service. In my region of the state, the average preschool educator enters the field making $13.51 an hour, and an experienced early childhood educator makes on average $17.51 an hour. This works out to $28,000 a year and just over $36,000 a year, respectively, in a state where the average cost of living is around $52,000 as of December 2021, no doubt considerably higher now. To give you a more personal example, my wife has been working in the field as an early childhood educator for more than 25 years, and she has 2 college degrees, an associate's in early childhood development and a bachelor's in developmental psychology. She recently became a co-director of a center in Brattleboro, and for the first time in her career, she is making just over $40,000. 25 years of working in the profession with 2 college degrees, and she's still earning less than $10,000 a year than the average cost of living in this state. Our 19-year-old son, who has taken time off from college to learn business from the inside, is currently the manager of the Jersey Mike's restaurant in Manchester. I highly recommend it. And last year, he made almost twice as much as his mother. We certainly don't begrudge him that pay. Frankly, I'm really happy he can pay his own bills. He works extremely hard and has proven himself to be immensely valuable to his employers. But what does this say about how much we value the people who help nurture our children and keep them safe every day? The people who comfort them when we cannot and prepare them for the academic and emotional challenges of the early school years. As important, what does this mean for the future economic vitality of New Hampshire families and communities? As you will read in the online testimony and hear from in-person testimony, the child care workforce shortage in our state has a serious economic impact. Many Granite Staters, the overwhelming majority of whom are women, have either involuntarily left the workforce to take care of children because of the lack of accessible, affordable child care options, or are forced to work fewer hours than they would like. The research done for SB 446 from the last session of the legislature cites the New Hampshire Economic and Labor Market Information Bureau estimates that a 1.3% increase in workforce participation by women between the ages of 25 and 54, made possible by an increase in availability of child care, would yield an additional $1 billion for New Hampshire's GDP. In early February 2021, the National Center for Children in Poverty identified the lack of affordable and accessible child care as one of the central constraints of the development of New Hampshire's workforce coming out of the economic downturn associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. And just last month, the Business and Industry Association wrote that one of the most pressing problems impeding businesses' ability to recruit and retain a workforce is the lack of accessible and affordable childcare. Without access to quality, affordable childcare for their workers, businesses are unable to fill critical vacancies, which limits opportunities for growth and stifles their potential for economic success. This is not a partisan issue, as we all know. Across the country and here in New Hampshire, we have people on both sides of the aisle working together to find solutions. At least 6 other states with Democratic and Republican legislatures and governors have signing and retention bonuses for child care workers, including Alabama, Connecticut, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, and New Jersey. Here in New Hampshire, we have implemented signing and retention bonuses for critically important state government jobs. Why would we not do the same for child care workers who are essential to the financial well-being and future of our families and communities? Building this vital workforce means compensating the workers and treating them like the professionals they are, and HB 566 provides one path for moving in that direction, or in the direction of a productive public-private partnership without increasing the financial burden on families. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Questions? Representative Nagel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. I'm curious, do you have data about the turnover rate for employees? And you've specified between child care worker and child care educator.
Yes.
I'm impressed your wife stayed in the field that long. But what's the turnover rate? Because that'll have a huge effect on this bonus structure here.
I do not have that information. We have some providers here today who will give you some, I think, good concrete answers to that question.
Thanks. Thank you.
All set. Representative McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. While I agree that child care issues is very important and certainly increasing the workforce participation would be huge, just looking at how this is structured, once you're into it, it looks like you're giving a $3,000 bonus every 5th year. And so I'm just wondering how that was arrived at, because I really question its ability to really do what it's promising to do in terms of being able to retain someone. Based on what you're describing about your wife, $3,000 every 5 years is not something that would kind of turn me on a lot. You know what I'm saying? So your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. I very much appreciate the question, and I certainly would like to see it be significantly higher in terms of the bonus structure. There are also some other there's other legislation that would make bonuses annual and would amount over that 5-year period to a larger amount. So I agree that there are this number could be higher, and there's a different way to structure it. The reason why I structured it, to try to answer your question, the reason why I structured it the way I did had to do largely with, again, thinking about personal experience. And if over that time, at 6 months and then 3 years and 5 years and every 5 years, if my wife had received $2,500 or $3,000, that's money that our family could have used for family vacation. It's money we could have used to pre-buy oil, for example, for the winter. So that was my thinking behind creating this particular structure. I think there are lots of ways to do it, but to answer your question, as I crafted this legislation, that was my thinking about spacing it out over 3 years to 5 years. As I said, there are other ways to do it, making it annually or quarterly, for example.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Merchant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also thank you for taking the question. I totally understand where you're coming from with workforce participation. It's critical, based upon what you just said here in your testimony, a 1.3% increase on the women part of the workforce would increase the GDP of the state by $1 billion per year. Why come to the state and ask for that assistance? Why would not the business community itself step to the plate? I mean, it's in their best interest to support this cause. Why not reach out to the business community and having them solve some of the problem versus coming to the state?
So I will, unfortunately, oh, no, fortunately, my co-sponsor is somebody from the business community, Senator Fenton, and I think he would be someone who would be good to speak to that issue. My question, in response to your question, is by business community, do you mean the childcare businesses themselves, or do you mean, what, could you clarify the question for me?
If I-
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not the childcare industry itself, it's the ones that use the workforce that the childcare industry would support. So if you're looking at greater participation from the workforce, I would assume, clarification here, that what you're asking for is to have more people in the workforce so that the economy can become more robust. Not so much specifically with childcare, but the economy overall.
Thank you for the clarification. Well, I certainly think that businesses in our community should be willing to contribute more for exactly the reason you point out. I don't believe that provides any consistency over the middle or long term, right? There are businesses who may think we don't have that many people working for us, for example, who need childcare, but also smaller businesses who may not have those needs, who may think it's a good idea, but may not feel financially incentivized to help out in a case like this. And then also, as I said, over time, if a business decides to contribute now or contribute 3 years from now, that doesn't mean that they're going to be willing to contribute 5 or 10 years from now. So having it structured this way provides a guarantee of consistency over time that the fund will exist. Whereas, as I said, I like your idea, but I don't believe that it provides that same stability.
Representative Weber, did you have your hand up earlier?
I was wondering your thoughts on the trade-off of doing it this way versus perhaps something like a restructuring our minimum wage here in New Hampshire. And did you give thought to that?
Thank you, Representative Weber. Thank you for the question. I think that both of those things can and should be done, right? As another representative pointed out, right, this is not a panacea. This is not a silver bullet. This is not going to raise wages to the levels that they need to be at in order to provide a long-term solution to this problem. So I think both of those things need to be done. I don't think they need to be done. They're not mutually exclusive. It's not that we do one or the other. I believe they both need to be done.
Thank you.
Okay. Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative, for presenting this bill. Looking at your testimony, you spoke to how for state government jobs, we offer the recruitment and retention bonuses. And you were speaking about offering that same benefit here in private child care businesses. You've also spoken to increasing that amount, increasing the wages. I'm just curious if this is moving towards more of a public-private partnership of looking at basically extending the public schools down to early education, or looking at a fully public model. I'm just trying to understand where you're headed here. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. And where I'm headed is adequate compensation for the workers in this field, ultimately. And I do think that has to take the form of some kind of public-private partnership. In fact, when our committee, I'm on Environment and Agriculture, but when we had coffee with the governor a few weeks ago, I was talking to Governor Sununu, and that's exactly the phrasing that he used when he was talking about how he envisioned us going forward being able to help build this workforce, is we have to find a way to have a public-private partnership. The idea of, for example, having our public schools extend down, right? So if we had something like a universal preschool that got folded in at age 3 into our public school system. The problem with that, and I think our providers here could speak to it more eloquently than I can, is that's going to kill childcare for younger children. That's the most expensive childcare. And so if we were to fold 3 and up into our current system of public education, it would absolutely, my understanding, could perhaps speak to that more, it destroys the private business model of childcare for infant to age 2.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Shapiro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking the question. Are you aware that a single parent with 2 children who is starting off working in daycare and making, I think you said $28,000, would be eligible to receive Medicaid benefits for their children? And aren't we kind of passing on other costs to the state by paying our child care teachers so little?
I had not thought of that, but as you pointed out, yes, absolutely. And I think your point is very well taken, right? That there are added costs to this already for the state that I haven't addressed in the bill, but that you addressed very well there. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, I see none. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Also signed up to speak this morning is Senator Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. For the record, I am Senator Donovan Fenton. I represent District 10, which is a lot of towns, so it's mostly Cheshire County and Peterborough. I have no formal written testimony. I'm actually going to hang up my hat as a legislator today and just talk about my experiences. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and my 2-year-old was on a 16-month wait list for childcare. I'm also a business owner, and when I go out to hire prospective employees, I can't hire employees because they can't find childcare here in New Hampshire. And I'm in Keene, so I sit on that border right between Vermont and Massachusetts, and I try to attract them, and I just can't, you know. The barriers for childcare, for housing, whole different story, are real, and I'm dealing with that daily. And that's truly, really all I have to say. If you guys have any questions for me, Representative said I was a business leader, but I'm not sure about that. But I'm happy to take any questions about a public-private partnership.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions for the senator?
Oh, I thought you were going to let me off easy. Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. I've seen articles and things in the past where, I don't know if it's necessarily New Hampshire specific, but let's say you want to have a little daycare in your home, that there are regulations that require you have like $10,000 stoves and you know, your air quality has to be specifically perfect, and there has to be, you know, rubber on everything to prevent somebody getting injured, and there's all these regulations and stuff. Can you address that? Is there a sort of cost that is burdening people from getting into childcare work? Because it seems to me like you want to get into childcare work and you're like, oh, sorry, I have to retrofit my house for $15,000 just before I'm allowed to even like do that. So that could be a serious barrier right there. You know, maybe we could move in that direction instead. What are your thoughts about that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Representative, for the question. I think that's twofold. Now, I think what you're addressing is starting your own daycare business versus we're trying to attract educators to the field. Because there's no accessible and there's no affordable childcare. I think that is an option. I think another option would be loosening barriers to have daycare centers in businesses as well. The problem is we have to do something because it is a problem. And you know, a strong economy is based on a strong childcare workforce, and we do not have that. And it's really gonna hurt us in the future. But I do think that's a good point you brought up, Representative.
Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for coming
to
over
see you.
here. Congratulations. It was great to serve with you on those committees last
Absolutely.
year. My question is about how we're having this committee that's looking at childcare and looking at the overall question. And as a business owner, I just want to ask you how much these subsidies, where the fiscal note came in, I think it was $3 or $4 million a year, how these subsidies to just go a short distance to slightly alleviate the problem are going to make a meaningful impact, as opposed to looking at those larger structural issues about being able to bring in a child care center into your office. Maybe some of the downtime for your employees, providing some of that coverage for their coworkers' time. How much do we need to reimagine this, and is this subsidy just a Band-Aid?
Thank you for the question, Representative. I don't believe I've seen the fiscal note yet for this bill, so I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. I'm not sure what it is. That being said, you know, a Band-Aid is better than a wound right now, in my opinion, because we have nothing. You know, like I said, my child was waiting for 11 months up to, and it's, you know, I'm not the only person feeling this. I'm sure you all have kids or grandkids that are in the same boat. I'm lucky I live near my mom, and we dump our kids on her all the time because we can't find a babysitter, and sometimes the child care center closes at 4, whereas I work till 5, or I'm here a little late, depending on how late committee goes. So I think any options right now are on the table.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Other questions?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, also signed up to testify is Donna Hajar from the Learning Path.
I'm new at this. My name is Donna Hager. I own the Learning Path Child Care Center, and thank you for meeting with us today. The business of childcare is an important one. I say it all the time, we are a legitimate business. Our monthly costs are over, they're millions of dollars a year. Dollars spent at local businesses, we pay federal, state, and local taxes, and we employ thousands of local residents. We do not get refunds or discounts for any of these expenses, but our annual income compared to our annual expenses is skewed. I established the Learning Path in 1999. Up until recently, I owned 2 large centers employing 45 teachers. I sold my Derry Center in December, but I still own my Salem Center. I have 23 teachers employed. These 23 New Hampshire residents who I am responsible to keep employed, I need to offer benefits and increase salaries on a regular basis. For the Learning Path to run effectively and to reduce staff overtime and burnout, I've been advertising for 2 new teachers. Because we are not an industry that can function without a full staff on a daily basis. Centers are forced to close classrooms because of our low staff. And in turn, this leaves families without dependable childcare, like you just heard the gentleman here. Help is needed. Any help will do. A Band-Aid is better than a wound. And we need it soon. There is an unprecedented staffing crisis within the childcare industry, and I've never seen this before. Please, let's work together. We could use your support. We are the workforce behind the workforce. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Questions? See any hand up? Yeah, go ahead, Representative King.
Thank you, Chairman McDonald. Thank you for coming today. So you've got business acumen, it sounds like. You probably balance a budget and checkbook and these sorts of things.
Yes.
I don't know if you would be able to answer this or not, but let's say you did get like a $3,000 check from the state of New Hampshire. Do you think you would likely have to pay federal income taxes on that? Would you end up spending like 30% of that just to give to the IRS? And if so, do you think it might not be better for you to receive more of a tax rebate in the like, so for example, let's say you're paying, I'm just making up numbers here, $10,000 a year in property taxes. What if you had to pay $3,000 less in property taxes? That would be, right, that's still $3,000 more dollars you have in your pocket, plus you're not having to give a third of that to the federal government, right? So maybe we could, how do you feel about, instead of the money going from taxpayers to the state of New Hampshire and then to your pocket and then to the IRS, what about just less money you have to pay to the state of New Hampshire? What do you think? Thank you.
Well, that's definitely another good option. The responsibility of the child care centers, once they get that tax credit, would it go to staff? They would have to be responsible owner to make sure that that credit goes directly to the staff and not to the business itself.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yeah, Representative McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So of the 23 workers that you have in Salem, and you're right on the border with Massachusetts, what is your retention like? How long have you had these 23 people? And what would the impact of this bill have on the retention of those 23 folks?
I opened the Salem School in 2011. My director has been with me ever since. And then I have teachers that joined us right away and are still employed. And I have teachers who have left to go to different fields because of the expense, the low salary. So compensation is important to retain, but we can only do so much because what happens, it has to come out of the tuition rate. So tuition goes up, and it's the parents who are now struggling because now, again, it's already high enough tuition.
Representative Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'm just looking at, sorry about that. The question is, We're looking at a huge lack of supply, and then we're also looking at the low rates. I'm trying to understand as a business owner how you're balancing increasing the rates so that you can provide that available coverage for people who need it, while being able to pay your employees more, but then also making sure that it's not pricing out other people in the market. I'm just trying to understand how you get to that, because I'm an economist. I look at supply and demand. You balance the price with the need, and I'm just trying to make this compute.
Yes, and again, it's raising tuition every time, staff gets increases. So for September, rate increases are expected, and it's not a low percent. We give $1 an hour raise every year to my staff. So if my staff has been with me for a long time, they're making more than they are in other centers, but it's expensive to do that. We are cutting back. We're raising tuition and maybe cutting back on other things to accommodate that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Representative King.
Thank you for taking my question, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the opportunity to ask. When I hear all the numbers, and what keeps coming into my mind is, what in your mind is driving the salary rate, the salary rates up, and what's which then increases the amount that you have to charge parents. What factor do you attribute that to?
Well, we always look at, of course, the minimum wage. We are a Massachusetts border town. My staff could go over the border and make substantially more than that. So that's always a struggle. So, and raising tuition is our only solution to that problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
Thank you again, Chairman McDonald. Again, I don't know if this is how it is in New Hampshire, but it's my understanding that in many states, in order to become any sort of child care provider or nanny or such, you have to get vaccinated with COVID-19. Do we have any requirement in New Hampshire to do that?
No, we don't.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I see none. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also signed up to testify this morning is Elizabeth Brunette from the Applewood Learning Center. You have 3 minutes. Just to remind people, I haven't said it for a while.
Thank you for having me. This is my first time testifying, so bear with me.
You're welcome. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
My name is Elizabeth, or Libby Brunette is how I go. I'm the director of the Applewood Learning Center in Londonderry, and I wanted to lend my support to this bill. As a veteran director in the field of early childhood education, I can tell you that hiring qualified teachers has always been a struggle, but since the pandemic, it's nearly impossible. I have had 2 open positions in full-time open positions with benefits for over 2 years now, and I cannot fill them, which results in me shutting down a classroom of infants and toddlers, which could accommodate 8 children. Now, 8 children doesn't seem like a lot, but when you have a waiting list of approximately 80 children, it's 10%. So we're talking about a significant number that of families that are not being served because we cannot staff our programs. Most of the time when a family misses the opportunity to enroll when we have an infant opening, they're looking at a 2 to 3 year wait on our waiting list. It's only until their child is preschool age that they are then able to access high quality child care. This potentially results in a parent being out of work for about 3 years. Our staff are in desperate need of support. We have teachers in our program who are qualified to work in the public school, but because of their own dedication to the field, they have stayed. They're oftentimes only able to do this because they have a spouse who makes an adequate income, they're living at home with their parents as an adult, or they're taking on a second job, which oftentimes that second job supplementing their meager income with us is sometimes more than what their hourly wage is with us. These teachers are laying the foundation for children's lives. They're learning their way of being in the world. The groundwork we are developing is helping to set them up to be contributing members of society. The National Forum on Early Childhood Policy and Programs has found that high-quality childcare is a $4 to $9 return for every $1 invested. So money spent in childcare is just smart spending. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you taking questions?
I can, yes.
Any questions for this lady? Yes, Representative Polazov.
So, talking about business decisions, if you have 80 people pretending for 8 spots, like what stops you from raising rates? Like, is there a concern that demand will drop significantly in coming years? Or like, why you're not just raising the rates to raise the salary? Thank you.
Why are we not raising the tuition rates? So our tuition rates are probably I would say the second highest in our town. For a full-time infant in our care, it's over $400 a week. So families can't afford that. They're paying more for childcare than they are for their mortgages. So we can't justify, we can justify, it's the actual cost of quality, but we'll then end up with people going to lesser quality programs.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, I see none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also signed up to testify this morning is Jackie Cowell from the Early Learning Center, Early Learning New Hampshire.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hi, I'm the executive director. I'm Jackie Cowell. I'm the executive director of Early Learning New Hampshire. We are a statewide nonprofit with membership services for childcare programs. We do cost buying and sharing and trying to help them put money back into their into their budgets. We also do some of this advocacy and on behalf of both the employers, the childcare programs, the teachers, and the families they serve. So our mission, if I didn't say it, is that we are committed to ensuring that every New Hampshire child has the opportunity to reach their full potential. So I'll be really brief because these are the people you really need to hear from most. But I used to run for about 13 years of childcare in New Hampshire. So and so what I'd like to say first, in addition, you heard well about childcare, both supports the workforce of today, but it really, in partnership with parents, it helps prepare the workforce of tomorrow, too. Something you may not realize, the math works on this, is that a child whose mom or dad or both work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, can spend more hours in childcare than they will in their public school career all the way through grade 12. The math works on that. And of course, you probably all know about the development of the young child and now the brain neural connections that are being made. This time of their life is so important to have great experiences. So that's another thing that childcare does in addition to supporting the workforce that people have mentioned very well. Representative Nagel, you had a question about turnover. And what I can tell you is not many surveys have been done during the pandemic. It's all over the map, and people say it's not indicative, but before the pandemic, and we know it's worse now. You've heard that. It really is worse now. About 30% of the workforce turned over every year. So by 3 years, you almost have a whole new workforce there. Yes, there are people who stay, and it's wonderful. That's what we're trying to do a little bit with this bill. From my work working with young children in a child care program, I can tell you we use the word turnover, but you ever go into one of those classrooms and you hear the teacher, their 3-year-old, in front of the 3-year-olds telling them she's leaving, you don't call it turnover. Pardon me, you call it loss. And we really don't want this to keep happening in the lives of young children. And so what we're really trying to do with this bill is whatever we can do. In addition to Band-Aid that's been talked about, I would call it a bridge. As the Health and Human Services and Elderly Affairs Committee, I would love for you to, on a policy level, say we support the idea of supporting the workforce. I tell you, it's going to go a long way to the field to hear that you've done that. Let finance figure out the financing, figuring out, where it's coming from, whether it's here or from there. But I would love it if the Health and Human Services and Elderly Affairs Committee would pass it along to finance. Say why it's so important. It will honestly go a long way to the field, knowing you understand the work they're doing and the teachers. And that's all I have to say.
Great. Thank you very much. Questions for this witness? I see. Yes, Representative Polazov.
Do you know what portion of tuition generally goes towards staff salaries as opposed to other business expenses?
Oh, thank you. I like that question. In fact, about 80%, 80 to 95% of the tuition that comes in, whether it's, sometimes the state pays a portion for families whose incomes, but it's no more money. It's still let's say it's $400 a week. State might pay this much, the parent pays this much if they qualify for the state subsidy. But the point, that's that tuition. Whether nonprofits and privately owned, almost all the money goes towards personnel. It's a personnel heavy if you're doing it right? So 80 to 90% of your expenses are the people doing the work, and 80 to 90% of your income is the tuition. That's where that's where people have talked about why it's so hard. The parents don't have it. You can charge it, but you'll end up with balanced dues, and it doesn't help the child, and it doesn't help the family, and it doesn't help the program. So we're looking to see if there's any other places besides the parents to try to do something for the workforces.
Other questions? Representative Nagel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. I'm really struggling with this bill for a lot of reasons. When I did the math, it's about $8 million. Am I correct, over 3 years on the last page?
It's over the 3 years. It looks like the fiscal note that came out yesterday was $3 million in the first
Oh, I
biennium,
see. I
$4
didn't
million
see.
in the next, and recurring.
I see.
And the reason why I bring that up is what you do is really important, and I really appreciate everything we're trying to do, but I want to make sure that this is an effective Band-Aid.
Got it.
You're competing with virtually every industry in the labor
Yes.
market, and virtually everybody's doing this, and everybody's ending up in pretty much the same place they started with. So
Right.
why would this be different
Got
to
it.
improve your your employability versus others that you're competing against?
And again, the field, obviously more would likely help more. But, and there are some bills, you'll be seeing them hopefully from the Senate, that actually do invest a little bit more and annually. However, if there's honestly something really needs to be said, and I do think it will have an effect. Would more money have more effect? Yes. But that's where I think finance can get into the details of it. I really thank Representative Germana and Senator Donovan for doing this effort to try to start and do some help. I really want to say, it's going to go a long way. The messaging, the saying it's important that we're going to invest will make a difference. While I think it's a bridge. It's a bridge to other solutions. There's the Select Committee on Childcare, but they may not have some, solution-based legislation perhaps till next year, or who knows. We need to do something now to tell the field. And I do think it'll keep some of the talent there. I really do. And we really want to keep the talent as much as we can. And the other thing with the empty classrooms, Representative King, you mentioned about the home child care programs and how difficult it is. Right now, and I don't have the number, there's been no formal survey of how many child care classrooms are just empty right now. They have the electricity, the heat, the toys, the classroom, they've got everything except the staff. If we could do something, there's incentives here for new staff, et cetera, we might be able to start filling those back up, and that will have an effect too.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for taking my question. Kind of following up on what Representative King asked. I know he asked about the overall COVID-19 vaccine mandate not being a thing, but is it a thing for individual child care learning?
Yeah.
So have a lot of them made that decision.
To leave the field, you mean? As a
No,
re- oh,
yes,
oh.
exactly. Yeah.
That's a good question. Let me just,
Okay.
they're better at this. I haven't heard it, put it that way, that it's made a big difference in time. The difficulty of COVID, of closing classrooms and not being able to get paid and all the sorts of things, that's been tough, but I don't think it's about a masking. So or vaccination. Let me just ask.
Yeah.
Has the masking or vaccination been an issue in losing staff? I think at the beginning. Maybe a little? Okay. Right. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Ah.
Okay.
Okay.
But I think there have been quite a bit of returns. You know, there was sort of a panic and a misunderstanding in the beginning of the March, April, May. There have been some returns, but I don't have that stats. But right now, the difficulty is simply if, you know, and the state is trying to help with this, that parents, if the classroom has to close, but that's a whole separate, yeah.
Follow up.
Follow-up.
Thank you. So are there still centers implementing those mandates?
There may be, Representative, I don't know. It's not
Okay.
often talked about, or what's talked about is the difficulty of having to close a classroom down and parents not being able to have childcare and staff not being able to get paid if they've got it, but not about vaccinations or masking, yeah.
Do you have
Yeah.
a follow-up, another one?
I do.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so with that said,
Yeah.
That could be a real issue for staffing. So has there been conversations around
Not closing down, maybe you're thinking?
not dropping those to encourage people that may have left
Yeah.
and what to come back and solve
Right.
some of these staffing solutions? Because yours isn't the only field we've heard this in.
Of course. yeah.
So, and we're trying to get to the root of a lot
Yeah,
of these
yeah.
issues.
And I'll be honest, it's not a big talked about thing for a reason to leave the field. It's not a big reason that people are talking about to not come in, honestly. However, they are following the CDC guidelines as they are right now, so, yeah. It hasn't really been a big discussion. The inability to cover their costs, you know, anything that can help them meet their rent, any help is really what they're talking about, the field, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Representative Shapiro, did you have a question, or? Oh, okay. I see no other hands, so thank you.
Thank you.
Also signed up to testify this morning is Will Stewart. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Will Stewart, and I am the Executive Director of Stay, Work, Play New Hampshire, and we're a statewide nonprofit whose mission is to attract and retain more young people here in the Granite State. And that's important, just to lay the groundwork, for a few reasons, one of which we're the second oldest average age in the country. Here in New Hampshire, have one of the lowest unemployment rates and one of the highest out-migration rates of high school seniors. We need more people. In general, here in New Hampshire, we need more young people in particular. And these are just some of the reasons that Stay, Work, Play is in support of this bill and others this session that look to support childcare and the childcare workforce in particular. Young people, here in New Hampshire, are needed not just, as we've heard, as employees for our state's employers, but to serve an elected office at the state and local level, to serve local nonprofits, to pass the plate at church or synagogue. We need more people. And for young people here in New Hampshire, childcare, as we've heard, is a major issue, and one of the reasons that we don't maybe have as many kids, and one that will encourage others to leave the state, among others. Young people in New Hampshire face a number of challenges, some of which we all face, some of which are unique to young people. Certainly, we've all seen housing costs, skyrocket on the rental market in particular, which are disproportionately occupied by young people. We've seen utility costs, increasing, which affect us all. Young people in particular are more burdened with student debt, having those payments, and of course with childcare, being young people of childbearing age. These all kind of come together to create really a perfect storm of challenges for living in New Hampshire and being young. And I'll leave you with this one anecdote that you heard from a young woman in the Upper Valley a few years ago when we were out kind of making the rounds, talking to young people in each region of the state about, what makes it a challenge, to live in their in their regions of the state and what they like about it too. And as I mentioned, this one young woman was in the Upper Valley, but I think the comment applies to New Hampshire as a whole. She said, the Upper Valley is a wonderful place to raise a family, but it's a really terrible place to try and start one. And that comment is one that's kind of stuck with me these past 2 or 3 years, and really helps fuel me and our organization to do everything we can to make New Hampshire more amenable for young people and easier to live here. And of course that includes everything that we can do to lower the cost of childcare for parents who don't are a little bit more challenged in being able to address those price increases. So thank you for listening to me today, and happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Okay, questions? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, in your capacity as Executive Director of Stay Work Play, have you ever looked at the retention rate on child care workers in Massachusetts versus New Hampshire, and compensation in Massachusetts versus New Hampshire? Have you looked at those figures, or do you have access to them?
That's not a level that we get into. I would defer to my colleagues who are more literally and figuratively invested in the child care industry.
Mr. Chair, would
A follow-up?
would it be possible? Ms. Cowell raised her finger up, so she might have that answer. Would it be okay if she answered that question?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Representative McLean. The New Hampshire Bulletin
Up to a
recently had an
microphone, please.
article.
If you could come up to the microphone so we can hear better.
Sure. Hi, again, Jackie Cowell from Early Learning New Hampshire. The New Hampshire Bulletin recently had an article by Anne Marie Timmons, which mentioned that in Massachusetts, the average salary or wage is about $10,000 more than those in New Hampshire childcare folks were earning. In Maine, I might be mixing this up, but I think in Maine it's about 8,000 more, 8,400 more, and in Vermont it was about 6,300 more. I may be not exactly right, but $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 difference per year, and I don't know the turnover. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Yes, Representative Merchant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And also, could you follow up on, they're paying the workers more. Where's the additional money coming from?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
You, you mentioned in other states, Mass, Maine, and Vermont, the healthcare workers making more in those states than here in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
So in order to compensate them for the additional wages, where's the additional money coming into the business to support? Is it coming from the private market, from the public market? How is that being sustained and maintained?
The bulk of the money that goes into a childcare business to pay their staff is from parent tuition. Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? I'm seeing no other questions, so, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Stewart, thank you. You presented a lot of facts that I thought sounded great, but I'm wondering if you could send the main bullets of your oral testimony in writing somehow.
I would be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? I'm seeing none. Thank you very much. Also signed up to testify this morning is Lynn Willett.
Good morning, and thank you for having us.
Good morning.
So my name is Lynn Willett. I have been in the field of early childhood for 41 years now. I am a director at a school in Amherst, New Hampshire called Nellie's Treehouse. I currently employ 15 employees. I need 19 employees. I have had ads out for months and months and months. Sometimes we hire someone, they accept a position, and they don't show up. In doing this for 41 years, our primary goal is to make sure that the children in our care are loved and have consistency so that they can learn appropriately. That is not happening now. It isn't COVID that caused it. COVID started the problem, but it's always been a problem. But right now, when I have an employee who comes in and I say, I can offer you $15 an hour, Target down the street is offering them 20. I can't raise my parents' costs anymore. And when I do raise their costs, they have to consider their housing, their electricity, their food, everything rising for them. My staff deserve to make a living wage. I work in the classroom because we don't have staff. I have a wait list of 87 children. And on Monday, because of my lack of staffing, I had to call 2 parents and say, I am really sorry, but your children can't start next Monday, and I'm not sure when they can start because I had a staff member who left to go work at Target, and I had a staff member who took a job in a dental office for far more than I could pay them. We need to help our families. New Hampshire is a family-oriented state, and our children deserve the best. And if we want a workforce, we need to support childcare because we are that workforce behind that workforce. The parent I called on Monday cried because she needs to go back to work. And I can't help her because I don't have the staffing to take her children. I know that there were a lot of questions about masking and COVID, and we just stopped masking in September for our staff. A lot of our staff have voluntarily gotten all of their shots, and we offered a stipend for them to do that if they did it. But it's not the end-all, be-all. A lot of our staff are very dedicated to what they do. And if we don't stop and find a way to get people into this field, we won't have a child care field in a few years. So we appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. We appreciate anything you can do for our field. I know $3,000 seems small, but to some of my staff, that's a huge, huge benefit, even if it's every 5 years. So we want to provide the students of the children of New Hampshire with quality, consistent care so that they can learn and grow. We want to provide New Hampshire with a consistent quality workforce. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to support our families here without having to tell someone on the phone, hey, I'm sorry. I know you would do it to start Monday, but I can't take your child.
Okay. Thank you.
And she has nowhere to go.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any questions? I'm seeing no questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Very much. Also signed up to testify is Marianne Barker. You have 3 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Marianne Barter. I'm the Executive Director at Merrimack Valley Daycare Service in Concord, and I'm the Chair of the New Hampshire Child Care Advisory Council. I just wanted to testify because I felt like I could explain a couple of the questions that have come up. The first is that when I started in child care 21 years ago, I was offered $11 an hour. There are still child care workers who are making $11 an hour, and that's because the economics of child care does not allow salaries to match the rising costs in New Hampshire. It is expensive to live here. Our agency primarily works with low-income families, children at risk of abuse and neglect, and children with special needs. And I have never had a person come to my office and say they're leaving our center because they don't believe in our mission, but I've had plenty come and say they're leaving our center to work at Target. And I find the idea that people who are passionate about this field and passionate for this work having to leave to work at Target incredibly depressing, and it impacts all of us. I am a nonprofit agency, so unfortunately the tax rebate wouldn't work for me, but I think that that's something that's absolutely worth looking at to increase for-profit and proprietary centers as a way to increase their financial resources. I think that's a great idea. I did want to say that I can't raise I can't raise salaries larger than they are. I can't raise tuition larger than it is because the bulk of my families fall within that range of making too much money to get state assistance, but too little money to really survive and thrive in New Hampshire. And I already give them a sliding fee scale, and I know for a lot of those people, that maxes them out. We also have a food pantry on site, And there's many a time that I see the families come and pay me their tuition, and then they visit our food pantry. And that is disgraceful in the 8th richest state in New Hampshire. I'm sorry, in the United States. That is just unbelievable to me. I also wanted to mention that we remained open during COVID because so many of our families are low income, and frankly, they didn't have another option. And because so many of my colleagues had to close, that we really wanted a safe place for children to come in the Concord area while the parents worked. We also have a lot of protective children, so we felt like that they needed a safe place to be while their parents worked on their issues. During that time, I never lost an employee due to any COVID-related issues. During that time, afterwards, I never gained an employee because of COVID-related issues. We masked sometimes, we didn't mask other times. Most people are probably vaccinated, but I don't ask. We're doing the best we can to serve our families. I will say that in childcare conversations, I do not hear COVID restrictions coming up very often. So that's my testimony. I hope that you folks see this bill the same way we see it, which is a bridge to get us to the next step. I think in 4 or 5 years, childcare in New Hampshire is going to look extraordinarily different. There's things in place and things that people are starting to talk about at the highest levels that will change the way New Hampshire handles childcare, and I think that's amazing. But we need to get there with an experienced workforce in order to take advantage of these changes. We're going to have an entire generation of children that do not have appropriate safe care during the day.
Okay.
So that's my
Thank
testimony.
you. Questions? Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So there are educational freedom accounts available in New Hampshire right now. Would any of the parents who utilize your Learning Center services, have you directed them to the use of those accounts?
Are they available for preschool-age children?
I mean, they're learning centers, you said, so I guess.
I thought they were in lieu of education, a regular school. That's
Yeah,
what
so I
thought.
wonder how that, like, as a learning, if you're in a teaching environment versus child care.
Yeah, I mean, I
is-
think the distinction between childcare and
Right.
public education, that's always been sort of a funny relationship. We would have to investigate that further. I've certainly never heard of anyone successfully using the Freedom Care accounts
Yeah.
to pay for
I
their
don't believe
tuition.
that's how they're set up, but,
Okay, thank you.
other questions?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
Representative McLean, I did just want to say one thing. In Maine, they put $12 million into their general budget for supporting the childcare workforce, and the way they do that is that every month a childcare provider, every individual teacher and provider receives a $200 stipend. So, and that has increased retention exponentially.
Okay, other questions? Seeing none? Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Weber.
And would you be surprised to know that for that extra $200 that the Maine teachers are getting, for 30% of that to go to the federal government, the teacher would have to be making more than $170,000 a year?
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you for letting me know that.
Yes, Representative.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Can you please repeat your name and your organization?
Yes, I'm Mary Ann Barter. I'm the Executive Director at Merrimack Valley Daycare Service, and I'm the Chair of the New Hampshire Child Care Advisory Council.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, I don't see any, so
Thank you
thank you
so
very
much.
much. And the last person signed up to testify on this bill this morning is Sebastian, and I apologize if I mispronounced the last name, Fuentes?
You got it right.
Oh, excellent, okay, I'm doing well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. Once again, my name is Sebastian Fuentes. I'm the Movement Politics Director for Rights and Democracy of New Hampshire. But I'm here, most importantly, kind of representing myself. I have 4 kids myself. 2 of them are 3 and 2 years old. The only reason why I have this job and I'm able to do this job is because my wife has to work 3 shifts, 12-hour shift overnight, so somebody can take care of our children. And why is that? It's because we cannot afford the $640 a week to take care for two kids on the daycare system. So I'm here to in support of this bill to see if you guys can provide the right amount of support to the childcare workers that need it so much. Another thing, for 20 years of my life, I work in the hospitality industry up in the North Country. Representative Keene might be aware, Mount Washington Hotel is one of the largest employers up there. Many times, and I can count about maybe 50 to 60 people that we interviewed throughout 10 years that have to leave the area or cannot take a job because they cannot find childcare available in the area, and whatever is available is not affordable. So whatever you guys, this committee can do to help the childcare workers in New Hampshire, that'll be greatly appreciated. So that's all my testimony. I think many of them give their good perspectives, but I wanted to give the another one as a parent of somebody that has to struggle with this every single week. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are you taking questions, sir?
Absolutely, yes.
Are there any questions for this gentleman? I guess not. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I have no one else signed up to testify. Is there anyone present who does want to testify on House Bill 566? Okay, seeing no one, I am going to close the public hearing on House Bill 566. At this time, it's just, it's approaching the lunch hour. I know last week we skipped lunch, but we're doing much better today. So would anyone object if we recess until 1 o'clock? Okay, I